Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and it is time for the final mono-colored set review for Guilds of Ravnica. Tomorrow we'll do the first half of the Guilds of Gold, and then the next day we'll do the second half, the last two guilds, along with artifacts and lands. But today we've got green. Remember, this is a limited only set review. We're talking about draft, we're talking about sealed. But let's get started with an adorable card. Affectionate Indrik, also known as Friendly Push. 5 and a green for a creature beast at uncommon. It's a 4/4. When Affectionate Indrik enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. Which is really sad. This little brontosaurus looking thing here is just nuzzling you off a cliff. It's not fighting you. How's that a fight? Anyways, flavor fail aside here, this card's fine. It's like a crappy territorial Allosaurus, except it's a 4/4 instead of a 5/5, and you never get to cast it for cheap. You're always waiting until turn 6, but that's probably still just totally and utterly fine. 6 is kind of the mana cost that you'll typically always generally get to in most games of Magic, but it's also right on that border of, boy, you're just not going to get there sometimes. So while the effect is for sure super powerful, and you do get yourself a 4/4 that has hopefully killed something and lived, and if not, it's just really expensive removal for an X4, I think the mana cost is going to restrict this to the B- level. I don't really want to go any higher than B-, just because of that very expensive casting cost. That being said, though, I think there are still some packs where you might consider first picking this. It's going to be a weaker-ish pack, but you're going to pick this relatively highly after that. B- for Affectionate Indrik. Just don't load up on these. Multiples are going to have diminishing returns. Next up is Arboretum Elemental. Arboretum Elemental is 7 green for a creature elemental at uncommon. It's a 7/5 with Convoke and Hexproof. Yay. This, if you haven't heard the rant before, is a mechanic that absolutely must die. Absolutely must go away, or at least be relegated to instants that give it until end of turn. Hexproof is obnoxious. It makes a card utterly unable to be interacted with outside of combat. Luckily, Arboretum Elemental is a 5 toughness creature. It's on the ground. It doesn't have trample. So it's a little bit better. And by better, of course, I mean worse, but it's better for the game of Magic that you can double block this and kill it. There are some unfortunate things going on where a rock charger paired up with this makes it fly, and then you'll basically never, ever, ever deal with this. But the other upside is that this does cost 9 mana. So even with Convoke and cheapening it with creatures that you're tapping for extra mana or to reduce the cost, this still comes down quite late. So I'm hoping this card isn't too oppressive. I'm really, really, really hoping that. But there's just going to be a bunch of games where this stupid thing comes down and there's going to be jack all that you can do about it. And that is awful, awful, awful problematic game design. So I think, rant aside, I think this is probably like a C+, possibly in the B- range if you definitely can go very, very wide with your deck and definitely get this down a little bit earlier. But as is, I think I'm going to keep it at around the C+ range. And man, Hexproof absolutely must go. It has to go. Stay tuned tomorrow for an even worse card. Rant over. Up next is Beast Whisperer. Beast Whisperer is 2 green for a creature elf druid at rare. It's a 2/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. This is great. 4 mana 2/3 is not my favorite thing, but there's a solid level of card advantage here for the average green deck, and is probably just 100% of the time always worth it. It's sort of your typical B level card. It's not a bomb. It's not going to just win you the game. It doesn't impact the board, but it's got that potential unchecked value that's going to be fantastic. I think it's probably just first pickable in a fair number of packs. You're going to take removal over this, I think, and you're certainly going to take bombs over this. But beyond that, it's a solid B. Really like Beast Whisperer. I think it's going to do some serious work in a lot of green decks. Up next is Bounty of Mite. Bounty of Mite is 4 green for an instant at rare. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Target creature gets, you guessed it, +3/+3 until end of turn. This is templated in this way because you can target 3 different creatures. You could target one creature 3 times. You could target one creature twice and another creature once. And I guess that's probably all the permutations that you could do here, but it allows you to be a little bit more flexible. But it's a 6 mana combat trick. It's an awful rare. I don't ever want to see this as my rare. It's one of the more expensive combat tricks ever, and it does basically what a cheap one does, unless you're putting all 3 on specifically a trampler. What does it matter if your creature gets +9/+9 or if it gets +3/+3 if all it is doing is eating a creature and the rest of the damage is going away? Now, you can, of course, spread this over a few creatures to maybe sneak through some extra damage after blocks have been assigned. But again, you could just put it all on one, and it's going to be the same net amount of damage. So I guess really more it's going to be used to surprise eat 3 creatures. But again, we're now getting into this situation where we have to have 3 creatures, and our opponent has to block all of those 3 creatures. And +3/+3 must successfully kill those creatures, which it probably will. We're going through a bunch of steps in order to make this card good, instead of this card just being good. Now, it's going to be grown testy for sure when your opponent flies in with a 2/2 and you can't block it, or you choose not to block it, and then surprise you take 11. That's going to suck. But remember, this is a rare. You should just never ever be playing around that. You should never ever assume they have this unless you saw it in a previous game. I don't like this card. I don't really want to play this card. I've got it at a D. It's just so expensive. I would just rather play more creatures or other stuff that does more. It's going to be annoying when you lose to this card, but I don't super think it's correct to play it. So D for Bounty of Mite. Up next is Circuitous Root. Circuitous Root is 3 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. In a 2-color deck, I think this is just way too slow, as I have to remind people constantly, ramping on turn 4 isn't ramping. That's way too late. You need to be affecting the board. You need to be doing stuff. Turn 4, that's way too late to ramp. This could have been a 4-drop creature instead. I just don't want to play this in those decks. But if I'm splashing, this looks totally fine. Much more in the C+ range. So know if you should be playing this or not, and pick it appropriately late in pack 1. And in further packs, you can push that up a little bit if you've already started to kind of spread into a 3-color deck. So C+ if you are 3+ colors, D if you are a 2-color deck. Up next is Crushing Canopy with gorgeous art. It looks so different. I really like that art. Crushing Canopy is 2 and a green for an instant at common. Choose one. Destroy target creature with flying, or destroy target enchantment. I'm not sure if this will be main deckable. You don't always face flyers. For some quick numbers on that, there's only 6 at common, and they're almost entirely in blue-white. There's an okay number at uncommon. At rare, there's only 4 flyers, and one's Narc Amoeba. Who the hell cares about that? And one's Niv Mizzet. That's probably not ever going to be cast, or at least not without some difficulty. And Mythic has some scary ones. That's where maybe it's okay, but you should never be main decking a card in case of a Mythic. So I don't know that Crushing Canopy is exactly main deckable. You just won't always face the flyers, and I don't think you'll always face enchantments. There's certainly some annoying ones. Divine Visitation, even the Frenzy one from Red from yesterday could be something that I'd want to kill, but ultimately this is all leading to a sideboard only card for me. A D+, a great sideboard card, but a card that I definitely want to have in my sideboard to answer something in Game 2 or Game 3. I don't want the dead card in my hands in Game 1. Up next is caron Dissident. caron Dissident is 1 and a green for a creature elf warrior at common. She's a 2/2. And for 4 and a green, you can have caron Dissident give herself +2/+2 until end of turn. Yeah, this is a bear with an upside bear. That's about it. It's fine on 2, and then later in the game, you can pay 4 and a green to have her staple a bear to herself again. This is like a C+ by basic definition. It's a relatively middle-of-the-road C+. You don't want to load up on these, but you're totally okay to play the first one, maybe even the second one. C+ for caron Dissident. Up next is District Guide, and man, do I have problems saying district followed by another word. Anyways, District Guide is 2 and a green for a creature elf scout at uncommon. It's a 2/2. When District Guide enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card or gate card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. This one, like Circuitous Root, is totally based on your deck. If you are splashing, you'll be okay with this. It doesn't ramp you. Please don't think this ramps you. It just fixes your mana by putting it into your hand. And if you're just playing 2 colors, you have no real need to play a 2/2 for 3 that just puts a land into your hand. So it's a D for the 2 color decks, and it's like a C, maybe C+, probably C+, actually, for the splashing decks. Up next is Generous Stray. Generous Stray is 2 and a green for a creature cat at common. It's a 1/2. When Generous Stray enters the battlefield, draw yourself a card. 1/2 for 3, draw a card. Great big giant meh. This card's way too expensive. It's way too unimpactful for what it does. Unlike Skyscanner, it's not colorless. It doesn't fly. It's a pretty stereotypical C- in that it's a card that you should generally cut if you can. If you have to play it, your deck's not destroyed. It's just much less good than is ideal. C- for Generous Stray. It's a cute little cat, but it just doesn't do enough. Up next is Golgari Raiders. Golgari Raiders is 3 and a green for a creature elf warrior at uncommon. It's got haste and it's a 0/0, but it's got undergrowth. Golgari Raiders enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. Not sure how I feel about this one. I feel like without a lot of work, this is not going to be a 4/4 for 4 on turn 4, basically ever. And it's going to take a while for it to become a 4/4 for 4, which is where I'm kind of happy-ish playing this. We'll say happy. It's got haste. At 3, it's a Hostile Minotaur. Did anybody enjoy Hostile Minotaur? Not really me. So you need to get a whole bunch of counters on this, and I just don't know how often you're going to be able to do that. There's definitely some self-mill that you can do. There's some very good self-mill. It kind of requires a specific mythic to do so. So I don't know. I think because of the variance built into this, because there's so many times where this card's going to be unplayable or unplayably awful, that I'm going to go with a C-. I don't really want to play this card. Happy to be proven wrong, but I'm going to start cutting this way more often than not. Up next is Grappling Sundew. Grappling Sundew is 1 and a green for a creature plant at uncommon. We actually have some Sundew just down the road here in London. Grappling Sundew is an 0/4 with Defender and Reach. You can pay 4 and a green to give Grappling Sundew indestructible until end of turn. I've talked a lot about being careful and thinking that one wall will stop aggro. I don't want this for that. But, unlike some of the other walls we've seen, Wall of Mist, which still bothers me that it's a gigantic going up to the clouds thing of mist and doesn't have reach, this can block flyers. Siding in a wall against a flyer is a little tiny bit better than siding in a wall against aggro, because aggro is never one creature. Aggro is many creatures. So I will side this in when I see some flyers, and this will handle most of them without even making it indestructible. And then sometimes, if you have the mana, if you need to, you can make it indestructible. But I'll side this in when I don't have a Crushing Canopy instead. I would prefer a Crushing Canopy here. So very low pick, sideboard only. I've got Grappling Sundew at a D. Up next is Hatchery Spider. Hatchery Spider is 5 green for a creature spider at rare. It's a 5/7 with reach and one hell of an undergrowth paragraph. When you cast this spell, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You may put a green permanent card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's Genesis Wave, basically. So, boy, is this ever expensive. 7 mana to get yourself a 5/7 reach. That's fine, I guess, but it's a lot of mana, and it's not ending the game. It doesn't have trample, it doesn't have flying, it doesn't do anything. It just blocks, and then it gets jump blocked forever. The Genesis Wave is nifty, but there's a lot of ifs here. You need to have a good amount of creatures in your graveyard to hit something, and remember, it has to be green. And you have to luck out and get it off the top of your deck. I feel like there's so much whiffing opportunities here that I probably will undervalue this heavily. Like, I'm thinking I want to throw this in like the C+ range, just because it's so expensive and there's so much chance for whiffing. Realistically, this just means I'm never going to play it because everybody else is going to try to play it, and I think they're going to be disappointed by it. I'm probably willing to go up to a B- just because a 5/7 is going to be pretty darn tough to deal with. Yes, it gets chump blocked forever, but unless you're dying on the crackbacks, you're eventually going to get there. But you know what? I'm not willing to go up to that B-. I'm going to make a stand here and give this a C+. It's just so expensive, and the Genesis wave part of it is so random and so whiffable that I'm going to put this at a C+. Up next is Hitchclaw Recluse. Hitchclaw Recluse is 2 and a green for a creature spider at common. It's a 1/4 with reach. That's it. I like this way more than I like Hatchery Spider, to be honest. This is main deckable if you need it, and a great sideboard option against some flyers. Hey Hawk fans, my spider says hi. Just a totally fine C. Cut it if you have better stuff, and remember that it's in your sideboard for those hawks and etc. Very much like Giant Spider, just 1 less power, but 1 less mana. Straight up C for Hitchclaw Recluse. Up next is Iron Shell Beetle. Iron Shell Beetle is 1 and a green for a creature insect at common. It's a 1/1 when Iron Shell Beetle enters the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It's a bond beetle, except it costs 2 instead of 1. It's still going to be mildly okay because it is just a 2/2 for 2 if you need that. And later in the game, when you have no need for it, it's a chump blocker, and it throws a counter on something bigger, making it even bigger. Probably just a filler C. There's just not much else going on here. Straight C. Up next is Crawl Foragers. Crawl Foragers is 4 and a green for a creature insect scout at common. It's a 4/4 with undergrowth. When Crawl Foragers enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard. I don't care about this. It's a 4/4 for 5. I'm overpaying for that. I'm not happy about that. And what do? I gain some amount of life between 0 and probably like 3 or 4. This is super cuttable. No real interest in Crawl Foragers. C-. Cut it way more often than you play it. Up next is Crawl Harpooner. Crawl Harpooner is 1 and a green for a creature insect warrior at uncommon. It's a 3/2 with reach and undergrowth. When Crawl Harpooner enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target creature with flying you don't control. Crawl Harpooner gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Then you may have Crawl Harpooner fight that creature. This is probably surprisingly okay. I think the secret here, the way to think about this card, is that it's just a modal spell. It's a sorcery speed plummet, because really, whatever flyer you're fighting with this is going to kill it because it's a 2 toughness creature. Or, if you don't need a plummet, it's a 3/2 for 2. It's a 3/2 for 2. I talk about how 3/2s for 3 are not good and cuttable, but you can begrudgingly play them. This is a 3/2 for 2. So I think this card's actually surprisingly good. I like this at a B-. Yeah, just, don't hold out for that flyer that may never show up. If this is just better as a 3/2 for 2, just play it. And then when it is a plummet, it's a plummet. So B- actually on Crawl Harpooner. I really like it. Up next is Mite of the Masses. Mite of the Masses is a single green mana for an instant at uncommon. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature you control. This is a combat trick. I like this more than I like Bounty of Might. Mite of Masses is okay. Obviously you want to be wide. But boy, 1 mana out of nowhere, potentially +4, +5, +6, plus who knows how much. Selesnya is going to love this. Golgari has some possibility of that as well. The plan here, of course, is to cast it on an unblocked creature for a huge boost of damage, but it can also work just as well defensively. Unfortunately, when you do have less than 3 creatures, this is underpowered. It's less than a giant growth at that point. So I think I am going to keep this at a C, but man, the blowout potential is huge. Bounty of Might, never, ever, ever assume your opponent has it. Mite of the Masses, it's an uncommon, which means it's still relatively rare. In an 8-person draft pod, there's on average of 1, but you've got to kind of respect it a little bit more. So C for Mite of the Masses, and boy, this is a card I'm afraid of. Up next is Nullhide Ferox. Nullhide Ferox is 2 green for a creature beast at Mythic. It's a 6/6 with hexproof. But hold on. You can't cast non-creature spells. Pay 2, Nullhide Ferox loses all abilities until end of turn. Any player can activate this ability. This is actually kind of a nifty, cool way of doing hexproof. It still sucks. It's still a little bit hard to interact with. But all I gotta pay is 2 mana, and it's a bit better to interact with. When I saw this, I thought we had turned a corner on hexproof. Then I saw the gold card that we'll talk about tomorrow, and then that all fell apart. Anyways, there's more on this card. If a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Nullhide Ferox, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. This card's obviously great. It's a 4 mana 6/6. That's really good. And if your opponent happens to play that stupid burglar rat or whatever, you can discard this onto the battlefield on turn 2 if they played it on curve. Yeah, this card's just really, really good. You have the downside of not being able to play instants or sorceries. If you really desperately want to, you can pay 2 mana, and this loses that ability for the turn. If you feel safe enough to do that, you can just do that. So I think this card's just great. I think this card's just like a solid, I think just A-. It's just really, really, really good. And I love that the hexproof is just kind of like a speed bump here, because you can just turn it off. This is a cool way of doing hexproof. I wish they would do this more. Hopefully they do going forward. But yeah, A- for Nullhide Ferox. There's no way you're not first picking a 6/6 for 4. Like, that's some serious value there. A- for Nullhide Ferox. Up next is Pax Favor. Pax Favor is 2 and a green for an instant at common with Convoke. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. So it's Giant Growth that costs you 3 mana, but if you tap a couple of creatures, it's just Giant Growth. And if you tap 3 creatures, it's a free Giant Growth. Quote-unquote free. A lot of people will think of Convoke as being, it's free. You're tapping your team. You got to be careful. You can't always just tap your team. Your opponent will just hit you in the face. But yeah, this is an okay combat trick. This is an expensive Giant Growth, or sometimes a slightly less expensive Giant Growth. It works especially well with Vigilance. You could attack in with your 3/3 Vigilance and then tap it to help pay for this if you need to. But I think the times where you need the help to pay for this are just going to be pretty low. So this is just a C for me. I think you play it or you don't. If you got a spot, go ahead. If you don't, you're not unhappy if you have to cut it. So C for Pax Favor. Up next is Pause for Reflection. Gorgeous art. Pause for Reflection is 2 and a green for an instant at common with Convoke. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Gorgeous art. Wasted on a fog. It gets an F for Fog. Don't play fogs. If you're new, I'll go on a quick little explanation here. This card doesn't do anything. All it does is it lets you live 1 more turn. The number of times where that's going to be in any way relevant are incredibly tiny. Yes, in that case, it's pretty darn good. Maybe you live and then you kill your opponent the next turn. That's incredible. That's the best card ever. There are going to be 99 other times where this card does literal nothing for you, and any other card would have been better in your hand. 1 time good, 99 times bad. Don't play fogs. They're just bad. F for Fog, for Pause for Reflection. Up next is Pelt Collector. Pelt Collector is a single green mana for a creature elf warrior at rare. It's a 1/1. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, if that creature's power is greater than Pelt Collector's, put a +1/+1 counter on Pelt Collector. As long as Pelt Collector has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has trample. This card's amazing. This card's very much like Experiment 1. It doesn't have Evolve, but it also doesn't matter because it's a 1/1. Barring random combat tricks or such, it's always going to be an even power and toughness. So it's basically Evolve. And the fact that this evolves on ETB and evolves on Death is really, really good. This is going to get some counters pretty darn fast. And once it gets up to 4 and is a 4/4 trample that you cast on turn 1, this thing's going to be great. I really, really, really like Pelt Collector. I think it's a pretty strong first pick. It takes work and it takes time, so I'm not going to go out of the B range for this, but I am going to give it a pretty solid B. This card's going to be good, and it's just going to run things over. So B for Pelt Collector. Up next is Portcullis Vine. Portcullis Vine is a single green mana for a creature plant wall. It's a common. It's an 0/3. It's got Defender, and you can pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice a creature with Defender to draw a card. You're not gonna be playing this. It's not a big enough wall to block well. Wall of Vines was horrible in M19. There's no reason to think this is going to be any better. And you're just not going to be playing that many additional defenders. This is just going to sack itself 99% of the time. So this is basically a mediocre, slow way to draw a card someday. Just no, I've got no interest in playing this. I've got this just as a straight F. Zero interest in ever playing Portcullis Vine, main deck or sideboard. Up next is Prey Upon. Prey Upon is a single green mana for a sorcery at common. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. This was the original, the plainest, the simplest fight card. Still fine. Still sorcery speed though. Still requires a creature. Still requires that creature to be an appropriate size. So all of those things kind of go against this from being, you know, premium removal. It's typically not first pickable, but it's pickable relatively highly. But you got to make sure that you do have those bigger creatures. If you're somehow a green deck, maybe like a green-white deck that's really into 2/2s, or 3/3s, Prey Upon's not going to look quite as nice, but it's still around a B-. I still generally would always play the first one, and the second one is often decent as well. But you got to make sure that you are pretty creature dense. Nothing sucks more than having a Prey Upon in hand and nothing on board. Up next is Siege Worm from original Ravnica. Siege Worm is 5 green for a creature worm at common. It's a 5/5 with Convoke and Trample. So yeah, it's a 7-drop, which really sucks for a 5/5 Trample, but hopefully you're never paying 7 for it. Paying 7 for this is not okay. 6 is okay. It's no Dreadmaw though. And 5's great. Less than 5, you are happy. If you're going wide, this is just going to be a totally fine creature in the C+ range. If you're going a little bit less wide, you're a little bit more Golgari-y, you're not going to have quite so many things to convoke with, then it's going to drop down to kind of like a C-, or maybe even be unplayable. You'll have to make sure that you are getting a discount on this. And again, the convoke warning that I've given a couple of times, don't just think that you can convoke your entire team at will. Your opponent will have creatures that would like to attack, and suddenly they get an empty board other than a 5/5 worm. So be careful with Convoke, but it's not a huge deal most of the time. So C+, C- for Siege Worm, depends how wide you're going. Up next is Sprouting Renewal. Sprouting Renewal is 2 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon with Convoke. Choose one. Create a 2/2 green and white Elf Knight creature token with Vigilance, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. This is totally fine. This is obviously not a Rec Sage, because you have to take the 2/2, or 2/1 in Rec Sage's case, or take the Naturalize effect. You don't get both. But because of that versatility, though, this is still probably just main deckable at like the C level. As I said, I think I said anyways, the artifacts aren't that scary. We'll get to them in a couple of days. There's like a couple that I'd be happy destroying. And the enchantments below rare aren't that scary or plentiful, but there are going to be cases where it's nice that you have that other option. The majority of the time, though, this is just going to be a 2/2 for 3, or maybe you can convoke it out. So I've got this just as a C. I think it's okay. It's not great. It's not bad. It's a C. Up next is Urban Utopia. Urban Utopia is 1 and a green for an enchantment aura at common enchant land. When Urban Utopia enters the battlefield, draw a card. Enchanted land has tap, add 1 mana of any color. So it turns any land into a rainbow land. It's great if you need fixing for that 3rd color, but otherwise, it should probably just never make your 2-color deck. C+ if you're splashing, F if you're not. Up next is Vigor Spore Worm. Vigor Spore Worm is 5 and a green for a creature worm at common. It's a 6/4. It's got Undergrowth. When Vigor Spore Worm ETBs, target creature gains Vigilance and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Vigor Spore Worm can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So 6 mana, we've talked about a few times. It's kind of right on that edge of you sometimes just can never cast it, and you generally can cast it. So I like my 6 mana cards to end the game. Now, if your graveyard is stacked and you have a flyer somehow in green, which I don't think you're going to, and if you're green-black, you have a chance at like 1 or 2 flyers. If you're green-white, you get a bunch more. So this is probably going to be better in green-white, despite the Undergrowth mechanic. Or a Trampler, which you may very well have in green. Then you're going to hopefully get a very big creature that's going to get in a bunch of damage. And then you get this 6/4 that can only be chumped by 1 creature. So this is going to live a fair bit. So ultimately, this 6-drop is probably just fine enough for me. I think there are enough opportunities where this can end the game or otherwise put your opponent heavily on the back foot right from the get-go, that I will give this a C+. I don't think I'm going to go up to B- for it, however. 4 toughness is really low for that 6 mana creature, and that randomness of just not having enough creatures in your graveyard to actually make the ETB effect relevant is a very real problem. So C+ for Vigor, Spore, Worm. Up next is Vivid Revival. Vivid Revival is 4 and a green for a sorcery, apparently at rare. Forgot that. Return up to 3 target multicolored cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Vivid Revival. This is an awful rare. This is going to feel so bad to open up. Please don't let this be my promo. Nope. I don't like these types of spells at all. I don't like using a full card, especially a 5 mana card, in order to return some cards. Especially when in this case they must be multicolored cards. There's a chance I just don't have any. It's a low chance, but the chance that I have 3 to get full value and that they're good is really low. So Vivid Revival just looks like a straight F to me. I never, ever, ever want to play this card. Straight F for Vivid Revival. Our second last card is Wary Okapi. Wary Okapi is 2 and a green for a creature antelope. Not sure why antelopes are special and not just beasts. It's a common, it's a 3/2, and it's got itself Vigilance. It's fine. It's a 3/2 for 3, which is that sort of C- level filler. Getting Vigilance is cute for the convoke purposes, but this can't attack into basically anything other than an empty board or like a 1/3. So Vigilance and Convoke synergy doesn't really raise this enough for me above the C- level. I'm still going to look to cut this when I can. If I have to play it, okay, but I'm going to actively try not to. C- for Wary Okapi. And our final card is Wild Ceratok. 3 and a green for a creature, Rhino at common. It's a 4/3 with a paragraph of flavor text. Nothing special to end this set review. It's a 4/3 for 4. It's filler. It's a C. You'll play it if you need a creature. You will not if you do not. As I've said with every vanilla creature that we've come across so far in these set reviews, there's so much other stuff going on in this set. Playing a vanilla creature is a hit to your deck. This one I'll keep at a C rather than a C- because it does have that 4 power for 4 mana, which is pretty nifty. So C for Wild Ceratok. So that's going to wrap it up for all of the green cards. Tomorrow we start the gold ones. I've had a couple of people say, you don't give out any A's, everything's a C. Wait for tomorrow. The gold cards are where the extreme power lies in this set. But let me know in the comments down below what you're excited for green, what you agree with me on, what you disagree with me on. Chat with me, chat with each other down below. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can find me at facebook.com/ShamanaLeek, twitch.tv/ShamanaLeek, and patreon.com/ShamanaLeek. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button, click subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with Reddit and whoever. And if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow for the first half of the gold set review.